All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is the last day of the Open Infra PTG for the 2026.2 Hibiscus cycle. We have quite a packed agenda today with the TC. The notes for this session will be on this shared Etherpad. You could use that. You could use you know, uh, the shared document or open it up in a different tab if you'd like. But Jitsi and Meetpad try to make that easier. Um, that said, the first session we are using a different Etherpad, and I'll try to share my screen. But you can click on it currently at line 117. And let me just look around if Allison's in. Yeah, she's here.
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome.
Sorry.
Okay.
I
All
didn't know
right,
you were back.
Allison, do you want to take over first, and then I can pitch in when we're ready.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for squeezing me into the agenda today. To provide some background, this I shared this with Gotham a few months ago, but it's come out of discussions at the board level as well as just from the feedback we've received from both operators who can and cannot take the OpenStack User Survey. So the OpenStack User Survey has been around. I want to say it's almost been 13 years. I believe we launched it in 2013. I believe almost all of you should be very familiar, if not intimately familiar, with this survey. And so one of the things that we have gotten a lot of feedback on is that there's barriers to participate, and the tool has been used in several different ways over the past decade. So like I want to reinforce that the purpose of this survey is actually to help us gain a better understanding of how people are using OpenStack, what some of their feedback is, and have it be a channel between the operators and the rest of the community, and hopefully be an entry point for them to get more engaged in the community and for us to plug them in. It's not necessarily something from a marketing perspective where we see a full comprehensive picture of the market, which I know is how it's been depicted sometimes in the past. So I want to stray away from that and focus more on how do we get more operators to share their feedback with us, with the community, in a way that their organizations allow them to, but they're also comfortable doing. And so, order to do that, I wanted to open this up to the TC and the upstream community to understand what are, first of all, what is the current feedback? Like, what have you heard, or what have you personally experienced, or trying to take this survey that introduces barriers to participate. So I first want to start with that. And I see that a few folks have already put some thoughts into the Etherpad, so we can kind of go through those. I was the one that put too long because that is the feedback that I get on a almost daily basis if when it's open and being promoted heavily, that it takes a long time, especially for folks who have multiple deployments who are filling in pieces for a lot of different components with their architecture. So that is one piece. So it looks like Slavik said some just questions like ones about neutron drivers or mixing core plugins and mechanism drivers. This may be confusing. It's not getting a full picture of what people are actually. Maybe those should be updated. Okay. So updating the drivers on the neutron driver question specifically would be helpful. Is that question still helpful, or is it something that is something that we could even think about separating? I don't know if he's on the call.
I am. Hi. So it will be nice to. I know that in the past I was raising this, and the answer was that you want to keep even old plugins and things like that. Uh, but in this specific question, from Neutron standpoint, like I see that we are kind of mixing different things together, and this may be confusing. So it would be great to maybe have update and change those potential answers if possible, so we would have clear picture about what people are using now.
Mm-hmm.
And if that would be fine, I can work with you on this, and I can also work with other Neutron folks to come up with more up to date and better list of answers for this specific question.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something where participation from you and the Neutron team on something like that would be incredibly helpful, just because I would like to, as we do make changes on the survey, and my goal timeline wise, I think I put in here is to have them all implemented by August, is that we only do one round of massive changes, so we don't do incremental. So having you engaged on that would be super helpful.
Okay.
So, while keeping in mind that there is a larger ecosystem than just every singular project, especially when there's a plugin interface, it wouldn't be bad to resurface out the discussions, because there might be projects with plugins that the Neutron folks don't consider, that might be useful for other projects to be able to see that data point at some point. Or external entities even.
Okay, that's really helpful. Gotham, do you want to talk through your point on line 12?
Yeah, I could. So it's probably a qualification of what line 8 was about. I think the feedback that we did get from operators repeatedly was that the survey was getting too long, and
Right.
so we had a lot of questions, and I think a lot of the teams had the same theme of questions. Are you using this software? What are you using this software with? What are the configurations and so on? And then there were some subjective questions that became harder to fill out as the survey grew. Like you would start out with enthusiastically, and then a couple of hours later into the survey, you don't have enough to give on these subjective questions, that sort of thing.
So your suggestion is to start fresh.
Yes, I wanted to say let's just throw everything out and ask the teams again, because I feel like we were getting a good comparison of things, because we retained a lot of the questions over a period of time. But I mean, from the last couple of surveys, the TC, for instance, did not do an analysis ourselves, because we kind of had held this view that this was not helpful anymore. So it was nice to see the trend. We're done, is what was the you know consensus. It feels like we should just start afresh and ask project teams, what do you want to know now in 2026 from the users, and then go from there, and probably have some sort of a limit into what they can feed into, because project teams may want to know a lot of things, and but then we should worry about the people that are taking the surveys as well.
Sure. And real quick, Doug, before you jump in, I just have a quick clarifying question. Are you talking about scrapping all of the like project and TC specific questions, or all of like the all questions, every single question? I just want to make sure I understand like the scope of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, the project and TC questions. I'm not sure what else is there though.
I thought you meant like the like how many nodes, how many bare
Hmm.
metal nodes, how what release is this running? Like there's I mean, I would say there's probably before we get to those questions, because those questions populate based on which projects the operator indicates that the deployment is using. So like if they don't indicate they're using Neutron, then some of the Neutron questions won't come up. The TC ones come up by default because they're obviously using some component of OpenStack. But there are questions, I would say, that or there's like 2 pages of questions that'll come through that are like more data driven, I guess. And those are I wasn't sure if you wanted to kind of I mean, I'm very open to revisiting all of those as well, because I think that there are some in there that could be beneficial to maybe remove if they're not providing value back to the community.
Yeah, starting afresh would make sense, because when you actually look at the other part at the bottom of this Etherpad, you're asking us, what would you like to get out of it? And that question remains saying, what is the size of your deployment? What are you trying to do with it? Kind of thing. So I feel like we will add some of those questions back if we were to start afresh. But that's just my opinion. We can take the others.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's good feedback. All right, Doug.
Yeah, I was gonna a little bit related to that, but mirroring kind of what Julia also said, is that certain project-specific questions, like, for example, the Neutron one, if you don't say that you're using Neutron, it leaves it off. But then if you do say you're using Neutron, Neutron supports plugins, and some of the plugins might not be maintained directly by the Neutron team. And so, like networking generic switch and networking bare metal, if we're going to let project teams add questions, we might need to include more folks. Like those are 2 plugins maintained by the Ironic team for Neutron interaction. So there's other interactions in play. So just let others.
Okay.
There's some of the extensions that Neutron currently has and supports aren't even supported by Nova. Right? So there is existing that was done with the Neutron core team to add an extension that violates some of the constraints for how this has to work to be safe on the Nova side and just as much. So the ability to change MTUs on VLAN networks, those kind of things. So having cross-service review of this in some cases is just good in general to make sure that they're not breaking the assumptions for the projects, because there's always issues that we do between Ironic and Nova interaction, or Glance and Cinder interaction, stuff like that. So when there's a pluggable extendable thing, having good socialization of should we add in a new plugin to that, I think is just beneficial to make sure that we're all in sync on how the contracts between the services work.
Okay.
By the way, I was trying not to say that we shouldn't allow one service to create a plugin for another. Like there were Ironic created plugins for Nova Scheduler over time, and that was fine. But like there needs to be a conversation if one project is going to try and extend another project to a plug point. There should at least be a conversation of how to do that.
To your
Sean,
point,
it's a little bit.
well, actually,
Oh, go ahead,
Jay
Jay.
had his hand up first. So
yeah, I put the comment in here. Obviously, I've worked multiple places where we were not permitted to fill out the form, or it took an internal amount of consternation to ensure that only one person had filled out the form more than once, led to like 3 or 4 different people all thinking they were the ones to fill out the form. And so I don't want to be like no fun here, but I kind of want to ask the meta question of, is the OpenStack User Survey actually the tool we should be using to get this information? We're getting information that is going to, by its nature, exclude people who are less engaged with the community. That's going to exclude people who have more unique or less aligned with integrated OpenStack use cases. Like, for instance, I doubt there are that many standalone Ironic users filling out the OpenStack User Survey. And so I'm concerned that by its very nature, we are getting weird data, skewed data, and kind of wondering if the juice is worth the squeeze here, or if maybe we need to take a different approach to answering these kind of questions. Because I mean, literally, it's been drama every place I've worked every year that these come out and someone sees it about who fills it out. And I don't think I've ever had one successful year where exactly one person from the company filled it out. It was always like 0 or 5.
Right. I have thoughts on that, but I think that's why hands started shooting up in the raise hand feature. So we can go in order. I don't know who was next.
I thought you were.
Oh, well then I'm happy to go next. Actually,
you were definitely up when I raised my hand.
Okay,
You're next.
Cool, thank you. No, I think that's really good feedback, and I think that like the second half, and that's why I asked the question next, is like, what do we actually want to, like, what's the goal? Like, what are we trying to get out of this? Because like, personally, I do think that there is, like, and I think that, so first of all, that is feedback we've gotten a lot, because, and I see the results and I see the non-anonymous results. So it's easy for me to see like, okay, you know, we're having multiple people from the same company. It's hard to really dedupe, and then doing some of that. And that's why some of the math takes a lot longer than it necessarily should. But like, I do think if we get to the root of what we're trying to achieve, there is some fundamental value that a user survey like this can bring, because like in terms of getting to know what users are doing and getting that kind of input and feedback, it is a way that people have been able to share that in the past. And I think that right now it's cumbersome. There are barriers, especially with some of the intricate details that are requested and some of the different perspectives that we're asking for. But I think that if we kind of revisit what would be valuable to come out of it, and we can turn it into a tool that, yes, you do have to be someone in the community to know about it, but we've even had people take it that have no idea what the community, like where the community is. They just find it because they're a user. And so I do think that it's an entry point for some, even if it's seen as more of a, something that is more familiar for people who are very active in the community for others. I guess it's my perspective.
Okay, I think I'm up then. There's always certain issues with surveys, whether you're reaching the audience at all, if people are finding it, so on and so forth. You mentioned deduping, Allison, and I do question that, because you might have different people in a company using different implementations and doing it totally different. So I would just warn to be careful on deduping.
We don't dedupe it by organization; it's by deployment. Like for the ones that are like have a lot, we usually reach out and make sure, because most companies do have multiple.
Okay, but yeah, I think what Jay was kind of getting to, not just that whether we're allowed to do it, but whether anyone even knows it exists. We run into this with the diversity survey. We put it out there. We hope people find it. We bring it up every once in a while. This at least is out regularly, but we don't always know who all our users are. That's the joy of open source. So I'm not sure the best way of making sure people can find it is the right answer. I mean, the first time I ever did it was in Barcelona at the summit. There was an area to go do it and get your t-shirt for filling it out. So there are ways to still be anonymous and get people to fill it out if that's a concern. But the main thing is getting it in front of people and making sure it's in front of the right people. And that's always hard.
No, that's good feedback. I think it's definitely been something that we have had mixed results. Of course, back in the 2015 to 2017 era, it was a lot more widely used just because we had more folks engaging. I think we're averaging about 300 people per year right now, which is still, in my opinion, a really good quality. And we get new people every time. So I think it's still, we're not getting as many as I would like, but we usually have a year-over-year increase since 2022, I believe. But yes, no, I think that that's a really valid point. And I think that getting in front of operators in general, just like user survey is one piece of that, but I think getting in front of OpenStack operators in general is something that I think it was discussed on the TC meeting earlier this week about what channels and how do we get these folks engaging more directly. So I think it's going to be a big effort for us in the second half of this year is to really try and re-engage both existing operators in the community as well as net new, because it seems like we've lost a little bit of momentum with that audience.
Yeah, I think I was next. I can just jump in quickly on a couple of things both Amy and Jay said. I mean, one of the reasons I take the survey is because there is now a thing that asks if you're I mean, what role do you play, and if you're an upstream developer, upstream contributor. I think and I end up answering for test deployments and things like that too, because there are parts where you can call that out, that this is a testing thing. So just and I use the platforms that I'm in to kind of amplify that and ask other upstream contributors or operators that operate in my space to just to fill out the survey. So kind of amplify that message. So the survey is definitely something that everybody should be taking, is all I'm thinking.
Yeah. And it's something we can always because there are technically two surveys. There's an entry one and then there's the deployment one. And that's one we've also struggled with separating the kind of making sure people realize they're two separate pieces. And maybe that's something that we focus more on too, is getting the general kind of community feedback by role. And then people who are actually running clouds can kind of deep dive into implementation and architectural details as well.
So I just wanted to highlight, Jay made a really awesome point about, in most organizations, thou shalt not say anything about what's on the inside of the walls. And I think every organization I've worked in, it's usually 3 to, as Jay noted, 7 different organizational steps to get approval to even talk about what's inside the walls. Because it's viewed as, what's inside the walls is always viewed as a competitive advantage. And many organizations fear any context leaking out. So it's a super hard challenge, but it makes me wonder if we almost need build the executive connections to where they can easily just go, yeah, I'm going to do this.
So one question on that though, is that just a problem because we're not doing this anonymously? Like if it's meant to be for end users, I know we have the operator group that are running the cloud as well, but if we're focusing on the end user feedback part of that, that can be effectively entirely anonymous without having to disclose what company it is, what deployment it is, maybe a high level, what version you have. But that's partially solves that. And no, it doesn't solve it entirely, but that was just what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it would be better if it was entirely anonymous, but it's also kind of behind a guardrail of account access or account registration, just to actually make sure it's only one response. But
so Sean,
it starts to have correlation too. But yeah, go ahead.
So Sean, you sort of nodded to an idea that I think might be actionable here, right? We currently are mixing two things together in the user survey, right? We're trying to get things like a core count out of it, like how much computer has been stacked by the open, which is one big question we try to answer with that. And the other is around use cases. How are you mixing and matching the services in the stack and stuff like that? I wonder if that's part of the solution here, is to maybe split it into 2 surveys, remove a lot of the specifics about environment size, about the type of company you work for, etc., and have it be do you interact with an OpenStack cloud as an operator? Do you develop an OpenStack cloud as a developer? And drop the people in the buckets with how do you mix the services? Oh, look, here's a person who says that, in their use case, they're using Ironic and Neutron and Nova, but not Glance. That's weird, or whatever, right? That's maybe a trick there, is if we can get it to the point where that individual can answer the user survey wearing their hat as an individual user, instead of it being so organizationally aligned, then maybe, I don't think the data would be comparable, once we cross that barrier, but at least it would make people feel less like the user survey is a chore. Because really, I've given up on filling them out for GR, because it's not a good use of my time to spend all the time getting the approvals to say the things, when I could instead be spending that, hours on VMT work or whatever.
I would also say it depends on what the data from the survey is intended for. If you're coming to me and saying you've deployed 1 million cores at Nova, that's not really something I care about from a Nova core point of view. I want to know about your pain points with that, but the actual total amount isn't useful for the project teams. It is potentially useful in the marketing context for the foundation to be able to do the marketing. So some of those questions I feel are there to help project teams understand what parts of the code that they maintain are actually used. And some of it is there to understand the meta thing of how many cores are done in the open, as you said. So we're confusing several different aspects into one survey, and I do think splitting it might actually be more beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that splitting, and I think there's ways that we can do that, because I know that there's individual IDs that we use. I think we actually do use OpenInfra ID for the user survey still, that we can track it without people having to log in and say who their company is. And I mean, I have my marketing hat on just because that's the hat I typically wear. So yes, we do use a lot of this because of the questions that we want to get around the strength of the OpenStack market and strength of OpenStack adoption. So being able to conserve some of that and being able to actually see some of the names, because I think this is also where we get to have visibility into some net new users. But if that's completely separate from the pieces that the community finds valuable, I think that that's still very doable and can still deliver both pieces of value without having to sacrifice, without people having to feel like their organization name is tied to the specifics of their deployment. Okay. So that, I think that actually probably the most actionable and most direct feedback that I have, or that's been received. And I think that it is very doable and kind of addresses a lot of the feedback that is part of the first section. I guess one of my questions, because again, I wear a marketing hat. This is going to be something that I would like to keep community, the TC and just the PTLs as engaged as possible. So my question is what is the best way to, like, do we want to split into like a working group, that like a temporary working group that can help make sure that we keep or discard or like separate the right pieces? But I want to like have it a bit more streamlined so that we can have like a productive next steps, because we close it and reopen it every August for analysis. So I'd love to have the new version go live. I think it's like August 22nd or something. So it would be, over the next 4 months to try and get these changes in. So maybe if we can figure out the best way to keep this group engaged, or even open it up to the community to get people to volunteer to help. I know it was effective when the UC was a group in the past.
Yeah, I think the last thing you said was just what I was gonna repeat and parrot. So when the UC was around, we did stuff like this where we would gather and talk about it. I guess I was just listening, but Amy knows more. So I guess a group like that would totally help, and maybe you could. I mean, it doesn't have to be too formal. We could put out a call, ask for people that want to join this, and you then make proposals to the community under the TC, for instance, if you'd want specific feedback. We don't want to bottleneck you in any way because you're working with the real deadline here, which is August. That's when the surveys typically go out. So I'm supportive of that idea of starting a working group and gathering people that would like to help.
Perfect. Okay. That would be super helpful. Maybe even if people want to add their name to the Etherpad now, so we can I can have a first group that we start with. That would be super helpful. Just because I'd like to get started on this sooner than later, because like we all have been talking about, it's a very long survey. So figuring out how we can divide it up and clean it up is something that I'm very would be very supportive of. But I know I only have 2 minutes left on the agenda. But is there anything like from people have started throwing things into the user or into this online 29, but like what you're actually you or your project team are hoping to get out of the survey that either it already is doing or it already is not doing, that you would like to see in this next implementation? Because this is a time to kind of voice our wants and desires for the user survey, that we can try and collectively bring it all together. I feel like Gotham, yours is really straightforward. Jay, okay, yeah. So both of those would be supported still by the split, yeah. Line 119. Oh, you're in the main Etherpad still. Thanks, Amy.
Maybe a
yeah,
quick
go ahead.
mechanics question.
Yeah.
How do we currently prepare the questions for the survey? Like, is this in an actual Git repo where we have a list of the questions that should be in it that we propose patches and review, or is this we talk to you to get the specific questions in, or like what would the mechanics for the project teams to be to contribute some proposals for different things we'd like to see in that? Because like I haven't, outside these conversations in the TC sessions, I haven't really been involved in that workflow. So I'm just wondering what the current process is.
That is a great question. Unfortunately, it's not the first one you said, because it's built into the system that we have on the openstack.org backend on our website. So it is straight through me. I try to put out calls for updates on the OpenStack Discuss mailing list before the cycle reopens every August. So it is a little bit more of a manual process to reach out to me to get things added, edited, or updated. The good thing is edits and updates can be made throughout the year. So for example, we just added Gazpacho as a release because it's now available for people to be running in their data center. But it is something that you go through Allison for, unfortunately.
So it's not a system tied into the existing OpenStack web. It's something even behind that you have to manually edit.
Right. It's not. What do you mean the OpenStack web?
Well, all the current web assets are in Git repos today. So it sounds like
right. No, it's separate from that. Yeah, it's like this. It's a survey tool that we have that is on our back end of our website that's not in Git.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Sorry, Allison. Oh, wait, Slavik. Give you 30 seconds, perhaps.
If I may, I have one more feedback. Thanks. Not really to the questions or to the survey, but to how the results are presented later, because it was a few times for me when I was looking into this page with results, openstack.org/analytics, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but some of those charts there are really not really useful for me, because there is too many data. Like the presentation of these results is not clear and not readable. Maybe someone should try to show those results in different way. And also another thing is that I know that there are some questions, like open questions related to how you are contributing, why you are not contributing, and things like that, for example, which TC is actually interested in. And all of those are not in the users, the results. Maybe it would be interesting also to have those results in this page as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So, and I will be very concise or try to, Gotham. So basically, yes, it is the challenge with the openstack.org/analytics is because a lot of the questions that we visualize have so many answer choices. It really clutters the graphs. They're not the right way for us to depict those results. And I'm very aware of that. It just hasn't been something that we've been able to prioritize fixing. When people have asked for specific data points, I can pull that for them, and we have done that in the past. So it can be a little bit so I can pull something that's a bit more clear. But those charts are something that is on the list to be improved. It's going to be part of the streamlining process and may happen the next cycle. But it's very much, I'm aware that the graphs are not very legible even sometimes because of this sheer amount of responses that there are. In terms of the other questions, so that page, when we initially launched it, and we launched it I want to say 5 or 6 years into the survey, we only pulled the quantitative data points just because those are easier for it to, because those charts are they're automatically generated from the results in the back end. And so with the qualitative results, it's a bit harder to do some kind of automated analysis with that, and which is why, and those questions tend to sometimes change from cycle to cycle, whereas the other ones have been static up until this point. So that's kind of the reason why they haven't been. That said, we do try and share them after it closes before the second half of the year PTG with the group who requested that information. So like, for instance, this one would be with the TC to share those answers. So it's not, if there's a better way that we can visualize or make that data more accessible, it's definitely something that we can consider as part of this process.
Awesome, thank you. And any further feedback can be added directly to the Etherpad. So we're running a little bit late, so
Right.
let's wrap this up. Thanks, Allison, and we'll discuss further on the OpenStack Discuss email list, perhaps.
Yep, sounds good. I'll reach out to folks who, or I'll put something on the mailing list summarizing this separate from the rest of the TC meeting. Do a call for volunteers and schedule a first meeting. Thank you for the time, Gotham.
Awesome.